My dad didn't just leave us, he replaced me. One day, I was his whole world. The next, I was nothing. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence that lasted 15 years. I grew up watching him love another family, like I never existed. And then, out of nowhere, he called. His voice shaking. His life destroyed. He needed help. From me. The daughter he abandoned. Funny how that works. My name is Emma Williams, and for a long time, I was just the girl who got left behind. I grew up believing I was loved, protected, chosen. My dad used to call me his little world, the one thing he'd never let go. But memories can lie. And love? It can disappear faster than you think. As I got older, I started noticing the cracks, the missed calls, the empty chair at dinner, the silence that stretched longer each night. Something was changing. Something I couldn't fix. I told myself it was temporary. That he'd come back. That he still cared. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it. Because once you admit someone stopped choosing you, everything breaks. And I wasn't ready to break. Not yet. And then, everything changed faster than I could understand. It didn't happen all at once. It started small. Fewer dinners together. Shorter conversations. Eyes that no longer looked at me the same way. I kept telling myself it was stress, work, anything but the truth. But the distance kept growing. Until one night, I heard my parents arguing. Loud. Sharp. Final. That's when I learned about her. Another woman. Another life. Another family he had already chosen. I thought he would fix it. I thought he would stay. But I was wrong. Because when the moment came, he didn't hesitate. He packed his things. He walked past me. And he chose them. Not me. Never me. And just like that, I wasn't his daughter anymore. And just when I thought that chapter was over, life had other plans. 15 years passed. No calls. No messages. No sign that he ever remembered me. I rebuilt everything without him. Piece by piece. Stronger. Colder. Untouchable. Or at least, that's what I believed. Until one day, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something made me answer. And then I heard his voice. Weak. Broken. Desperate. The man who once walked away was now asking to come back. Not as a father, but as someone who needed help. From me. So tell me, what would you do? Before everything fell apart, there was a time when my world felt safe. Simple. Whole. I was just a little girl who believed her family would last forever. My dad wasn't just a father, he was my hero. He used to carry me on his shoulders, laughing like nothing in the world could ever go wrong. And I believed him. Every word. Every promise. Especially when he said, "I'll always be here." That sentence, it meant everything to me. Every evening felt the same, warm lights, dinner on the table, my parents talking while I sat between them, feeling like I belonged. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for a while, that was enough. On weekends, he'd take me to the park. We'd run, we'd laugh, we'd stay out until the sky turned orange. He'd buy me ice cream even when Mom said no. Little rebellions that made me feel special. Chosen. Loved. And that feeling, it stayed with me. I carried it everywhere. To school, where I proudly told my friends how amazing my dad was. To birthdays, where he never missed a single candle I blew out. To nights when I fell asleep on the couch, only to wake up in my bed, because he carried me there. Quietly. Gently. Like I mattered. But even in those moments, something I didn't understand was already shifting. It started small. So small I almost didn't notice. A missed bedtime story. A late night at work. A distracted smile. I told myself it didn't matter. Everyone gets busy, right? That's what I believed. That's what I needed to believe. Then the little things became patterns. The laughter didn't last as long. The dinners felt quieter. My mom started asking questions, the kind that didn't have easy answers. And my dad? He stopped looking at us the same way. His eyes were there, but not really. Like part of him had already left before his body ever did. Still, I held on. I held on to every memory, every promise, every version of him I knew. Because if I let go, then what did I have left? I needed that version of him to be real. I needed our family to still exist, even if it was only in my head. And the hardest part? Back then, I still thought we had time. I thought whatever was wrong could be fixed. That love like ours didn't just disappear. I thought families bend, but they don't break. I was wrong. Because while I was holding on to the past, he was already building a future without me. And I didn't see it coming. Not until it was too late. But if I'm being honest, the ending didn't begin the day he left. It started long before that. Quietly. Almost invisibly. At first, it was just small things. The kind you don't question. The kind you explain away because it's easier than facing the truth. He came home later than usual. Not once. Not twice. But often enough that it stopped feeling like an accident. I remember sitting at the dinner table, staring at the empty chair, telling myself, he's just busy. That was the word I clung to. Busy. Then came the missed routines. The bedtime stories turned into quick goodnights. The laughter faded into distracted nods. He was there, but not really there. And every time I tried to reach him, it felt like I was reaching through something invisible. Like he was already somewhere else. I didn't understand it. I didn't want to. Because understanding meant accepting. And I wasn't ready for that. My mom noticed it too. I could see it in her eyes. The way she watched him. The way her voice changed when she asked simple questions like, "Will you be home tonight?" Those weren't just questions anymore. They were warnings. And he always had answers. Smooth. Quick. Almost rehearsed. Work is crazy. It's just temporary. Don't worry. But the more he spoke, the less believable it sounded. And still, I tried to hold everything together in my own small way. I smiled more. Talked more. Tried to be the version of me he used to love. If I was better, maybe he would stay. If I was enough, maybe nothing would change. That's what I told myself. That's what I needed to believe. Because the alternative? It was too terrifying. Then one night, everything shifted. The house felt different. Tense. Heavy. Like the air itself was waiting for something to break. I was in my room when I heard their voices. Loud. Sharp. Not like before. This wasn't a disagreement. This was something else. Something final. I moved closer to the door, heart pounding, trying to catch the words between the shouting. And then I heard it. Her. A name I had never heard before. A name that didn't belong in our home. My mom said it like it burned. My dad didn't deny it. That was the worst part. He didn't even try. The silence after that, it was louder than anything else. Because in that silence, everything made sense. All the late nights. All the distance. All the lies. There wasn't just work. There wasn't just stress. There was someone else. I felt something inside me crack. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet break. The kind that spreads slowly until there's nothing left to hold on to. I wanted to run into the room, to scream, to ask him why. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, listening as my world fell apart one sentence at a time. And even then, part of me still hoped. Stupidly. Desperately. I thought maybe this was the worst of it. Maybe now that everything was out in the open, he would choose us. He would fix it. He would remember who we were to him. But hope can be cruel. Because instead of fighting for us, he started letting go. The arguments didn't stop. They got colder, quieter, more distant. Like two people already living separate lives under the same roof. My mom cried less, but it felt worse. Like she had already accepted something I was still refusing to see. And my dad? He became a stranger. Not suddenly. Not all at once. But piece by piece. Day by day. Until one morning, I looked at him and realized I didn't recognize the man standing in front of me anymore. That was the moment it hit me. He wasn't coming back. Not emotionally. Not mentally. And soon, not physically either. The worst part? He had already made his choice. We just weren't part of it. And once the truth surfaced, there was no going back. Not to how things were. Not to who he used to be. The silence in the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt exposed. Raw. Like every lie had been stripped bare, leaving nothing but what we had been too afraid to see. My mom stopped asking gentle questions. Now her voice was sharp, direct, unshaken. How long, she demanded one night. No hesitation. No softness. And, for a second, he said nothing. That pause said more than any confession ever could. Then he answered. Too calmly. Too easily. Like he had already rehearsed it in his head 100 times. Months, he said. Maybe longer. He couldn't even remember exactly when it started. That hurt more than the betrayal itself. Because it meant we weren't just forgotten. We were irrelevant. Replaceable. I felt my chest tighten, like the air had been pulled out of the room. And still, it kept getting worse. My mom asked the question I was too afraid to even think. Do you love her? The room went still. Completely still. Even the walls felt like they were listening. And then he nodded. Just a small movement. Quiet. Final. That was it. That was the moment everything shattered for real. Not when I heard her name. Not when I realized he was lying. But when he chose her. Out loud. I wanted him to take it back. To say it wasn't real. To say we mattered more. But he didn't. He stood there, calm, almost relieved. Like the truth had set him free. Free from us. Free from me. And, suddenly, I wasn't looking at my dad anymore. I was looking at someone who had already decided to leave, he just hadn't walked out yet. The arguments didn't explode anymore. They collapsed. Quiet. Controlled. Dangerous in a different way. My mom stopped yelling. She started speaking like someone who had already lost. And that scared me more than anything. Because it meant she knew something I didn't want to accept. That this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't temporary. It wasn't something we could fix. It was a choice. And choices have consequences. Days passed, but the tension didn't fade. It settled. It became part of the air we breathed. My dad stopped pretending. No more excuses. No more effort to hide. He took calls in the open. Smiled at messages that weren't meant for us. It was like watching him slowly erase our family while still standing inside it. And then came the final blow. I'm leaving, he said one morning. Just like that. No build-up. No warning. Just a sentence that ended everything. My mom didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just nodded, like she had already lived that moment 100 times in her head. And me? I stood there waiting. Waiting for him to look at me. To say something. Anything. But he didn't. Because the truth wasn't just that he loved someone else. The truth was, he had already chosen a life where I didn't exist. And after that morning, the leaving wasn't just words anymore. It became real. Heavy. Unavoidable. The house felt different, like it already knew he didn't belong there anymore. I remember the sound first, drawers opening, closets sliding, the quiet thud of a suitcase hitting the floor. Each noise hit harder than any argument ever could. This wasn't a fight. This was an ending. I stood in the hallway, watching him move around like everything was normal. Folding clothes. Picking what to take. Leaving behind what didn't matter. And that's when it hit me. He was deciding what parts of his life were worth keeping. And somehow, I wasn't one of them. I wanted to say something. Anything. Ask him to stop. Ask him why. Ask him if I meant anything at all. But the words wouldn't come out. My throat felt tight, like even breathing was too much. So I just watched. Silent. Invisible. Like I had already disappeared from his world. Then he walked past me. Not slowly. Not hesitantly. Just past me. Like I was a stranger in his way. That moment, that single step, hurt more than everything else combined. Because it wasn't just that he was leaving. It was how easily he did it. My mom stood in the living room, arms crossed, eyes dry but empty. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. That silence was louder than anything she could have said. It was the silence of someone who had already lost. And I think he knew that. I think that's why he didn't even try to look back. But I couldn't let it end like that. "Dad," I finally said. My voice came out smaller than I expected. Fragile. Breaking. He stopped. Just for a second. And in that second, I held my breath. This was it. This was the moment. He would turn around. He would see me. He would remember. Slowly, he looked back. And for a split second, I saw something in his eyes. Something familiar. Something close to regret. My heart jumped. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe he still cared. Maybe, "Take care of your mom," he said. That was it. No apology. No explanation. No, "I love you." Just a sentence that felt like a door slamming shut. And then he turned away again. That was the shock. Not the leaving. Not the betrayal. But how final it felt. How clean. How easy it was for him to walk away from everything, from me, without even looking back twice. The front door opened. The sound echoed through the house like a crack splitting everything in two. And then it closed. Silence. Real silence this time. I stood there, staring at the empty space where he had been just seconds ago, waiting for something to change. For time to rewind. For someone to say this wasn't happening. But nothing came. Because that was the moment I understood something I would never forget. He didn't lose us. He let us go. And I wasn't the one he chose to keep. And just when I thought the worst part was over, it wasn't. Because losing him wasn't the end. Watching him live happily without me, that was the real pain. At first, there was nothing. No updates. No calls. Just silence. And somehow, that silence felt safer. Because as long as I didn't know, I could pretend he was struggling too. That leaving us had cost him something. But then I found out. Not from him. Of course not. From a photo. It showed up on social media like it meant nothing. A simple picture. Him, smiling. Arm around a woman I didn't know. 2 kids standing beside them. Happy. Complete. Perfect. My heart dropped before my mind could even catch up. I stared at the screen, trying to understand what I was seeing. That couldn't be real. That couldn't be his life. But it was. He didn't just leave us. He replaced us. I kept scrolling. More photos. Birthdays. Vacations. Family dinners. The same things we used to do, now shared with them. He looked younger somehow. Lighter. Like the version of him I had been holding onto still existed, just not for me. That was the shock. Not that he moved on. But how easily he built something new, like we had never existed at all. And the worst part? He looked happy. Truly happy. That's what broke me. Because it meant everything we went through didn't matter to him. The tears. The silence. The nights I waited. None of it followed him. None of it stayed. He walked away clean. And I was the only one left carrying the weight. I told myself to stop looking. To close the app. To move on. But I couldn't. It was like reopening a wound on purpose. Painful, but addictive. I needed to see. Needed to understand how someone could erase a life so completely. And then came the moment that shattered something deeper. A video. It was short, casual, but it felt like a knife. One of the kids, his new daughter, ran into his arms, laughing, calling him Dad. And he lifted her up the same way he used to lift me. Same smile. Same voice. Same warmth. Nothing had changed. Except me. Except I wasn't there anymore. I paused the video, my hands shaking. Because that was the moment I realized something terrifying. I wasn't special. I wasn't irreplaceable. I was just temporary. And somehow, that hurt more than him leaving. Because leaving meant he chose something else. But this meant I could be replaced. Completely. Easily. Like I had never mattered at all. That was the truth I couldn't escape. He didn't just start a new family. He created a version of life where I had never been part of it. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find a place for myself in it anymore. And after that, reality didn't just hurt, it settled in. Slowly. Permanently. Because once I understood I had been replaced, life didn't pause to comfort me. It moved on. And I had no choice but to move with it. Our house felt quieter than ever, but not peaceful, empty. Heavy. Like every room carried echoes of what used to be. My mom worked longer hours, came home more tired, spoke less. And I stopped asking questions. Because I already knew the answers. At first, I thought the pain would fade. That time would fix it. People always say that, right? Give it time. But time didn't heal anything. It stretched the silence. It made everything sharper. Every holiday felt like a reminder. Every birthday felt incomplete. Every father-daughter event at school? I stopped going. It was easier to disappear than to explain why my seat was always empty. Money became tight. Subtle at first. Then obvious. My mom started cutting corners, cheaper groceries, fewer lights on, bills stacked on the counter like quiet warnings. I noticed everything, even when she tried to hide it. Especially when she tried. That's when something inside me shifted. I wasn't a child anymore. I couldn't afford to be. So I adapted. I helped more around the house. I studied harder. I stayed out of trouble. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I had to. Because if I fell apart, everything else would too. And there was no one left to catch us. No safety net. No backup plan. Just us. Holding on. But even strength has a cost. There were nights I couldn't sleep. Nights when the silence felt too loud, too suffocating. Nights when I replayed everything in my head, what I did wrong, what I could have done differently, why I wasn't enough. That question, it never left me. It followed me everywhere. In classrooms. In conversations. In mirrors. Why wasn't I enough? And then came the moment that changed everything again. One afternoon, I overheard my mom on the phone. Her voice low, controlled, but breaking underneath. She was talking about money. About overdue payments. About not knowing how much longer she could keep up. I stood there, frozen, listening as the reality I had been trying to ignore became impossible to escape. We weren't just hurting emotionally. We were barely surviving. That was the shock. Not just that he left, but that when he left, he took stability with him. And we were the ones left to deal with the consequences. From that moment on, something hardened inside me. The sadness didn't disappear, it transformed. Into focus. Into determination. Into something quieter, but stronger. I stopped waiting for things to get better. I started making them better. I took on part-time work when I could. Saved every dollar. Pushed myself in school like my future depended on it, because it did. Every achievement became a silent statement. Not for him. Not anymore. For me. But even as I grew stronger, the pain never fully left. It just became part of me. A constant reminder of what happens when someone you trust decides you're not worth staying for. And maybe that was the cruelest part. Not that I suffered, but that I learned how to survive it alone. And just when I thought I had learned how to live with the pain, it found a way to come back stronger. Not as a memory, not as a thought, but as something real, something I could see. Because no matter how hard I tried to move on, I couldn't unsee him living a life that used to be mine. It started unintentionally. A tagged photo, a name I recognized. And then, there he was again. Not in my past, but in the present. Smiling, laughing, existing perfectly fine without me. My chest tightened instantly, like my body remembered the hurt before my mind could catch up. I told myself to scroll away, to ignore it, but I didn't. I couldn't, because part of me still needed to know. So I clicked. And suddenly, I was there, not physically, but emotionally. Watching a life unfold that felt painfully familiar. A birthday party. Decorations. A cake. Him standing in the center, clapping, smiling, cheering for someone else. His new daughter. The way he looked at her. I knew that look. I used to be on the receiving end of it. That warmth. That pride. That love. And now, it belonged to someone else. I felt something twist inside me. Sharp. Immediate. Unavoidable. It wasn't just jealousy. It wasn't just sadness. It was something deeper. Something heavier. The realization that everything I thought was unique wasn't. That every memory I held onto like it meant something could be recreated, replaced, rewritten without me. And then came the moment that broke me again. Another video. He was teaching her how to ride a bike, running beside her, laughing, encouraging her not to be afraid. His voice soft, patient, full of care. The exact same words he once said to me. The same tone. The same gestures. It was like watching my childhood, replayed, but with a different child. I paused the video. Because I couldn't breathe. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He didn't lose that version of himself. He just chose not to be that person for me anymore. That was the shock. Not that he moved on, but that he kept everything good and gave it to someone else. I stared at the screen, my reflection faintly visible over the image of him and his new family. And for the first time, I saw myself clearly. Not as his daughter. Not as someone he missed. But as someone he had already erased. And the worst part? He looked happy doing it. Truly, genuinely happy. That's what made it unbearable. Because it meant I wasn't just left behind. I was forgotten. Completely. And no matter how strong I had become, nothing prepared me for the pain of realizing that the love I once had was never mine to keep. And after that moment, something inside me finally broke for good. Not in a way that made me weaker, but in a way that forced me to change. Because I realized I had been holding on to something that no longer existed. Not a person. Not a relationship. Just an illusion. And illusions don't protect you. They trap you. So I made a decision. A quiet one at first. Almost invisible. But powerful. I stopped looking. No more photos. No more videos. No more searching for pieces of a life that had already erased me. It wasn't easy. Every instinct told me to check, to confirm, to hurt myself one more time. But I didn't. Because for the first time, I chose myself. And that choice? It changed everything. I poured everything I had into one thing I could control, my future. School became more than just a routine. It became my way out. Every assignment, every exam, every late night studying, it wasn't just about grades anymore. It was survival. It was proof that I didn't need anyone who chose to leave. But the pressure built fast. There were days I felt like I couldn't keep up. Days where exhaustion hit harder than the pain ever did. Days where I questioned if any of it even mattered. Because no matter how hard I worked, it didn't change the past. It didn't erase what he did. And yet, I kept going. Because stopping wasn't an option. I took part-time jobs whenever I could. Small things at first. Then more. Balancing work, school, home, it wasn't easy. It was messy. Overwhelming. Sometimes unbearable. But every dollar I earned, every step I took forward, it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. And with that control came something unexpected. Confidence. Slowly, I stopped seeing myself as the girl who was abandoned. I started seeing myself as someone who survived it. Someone who adapted. Someone who refused to stay broken. But then came the moment that pushed me even further. One day, I received my first major acceptance letter. A scholarship. Full coverage. A way out I had worked for, fought for, earned completely on my own. I held that letter in my hands, staring at my name printed across it, and for the first time in years, I felt something different. Not pain. Not anger. Pride. But then, the shock hit. Because my first instinct wasn't to celebrate. It was to think of him. To imagine telling him. To imagine him being proud. To imagine hearing him say, "I knew you could do it." And that's when it hit me. Even after everything, a part of me still wanted his approval. That realization hurt more than I expected. But it also changed something. Because instead of breaking me, it clarified everything. I didn't need him to see me. I didn't need him to validate me. I had already proven enough. To myself. And from that moment on, my motivation shifted. It wasn't about showing him what he lost. It wasn't about making him regret his choice. It was about building a life so strong, so complete, that his absence no longer mattered. And that was the real turning point. Not when I stopped hurting, but when I stopped needing him. Because that's when I understood something powerful. Walking away doesn't always mean giving up. Sometimes. It means finally choosing yourself. And once I chose myself, everything began to change in ways I never expected. Not overnight. Not easily. But steadily. Step by step, I started building a life that no longer revolved around what I had lost, but around what I could become. College wasn't just a new chapter, it was a complete reset. A place where no one knew my past, no one saw me as the girl who was abandoned. For the first time, I got to define myself. I worked harder than ever. Late nights turned into early mornings. Pressure became routine. And slowly, results followed. Top grades. Internships. Opportunities one once thought were out of reach. Each achievement felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I thought I had lost forever. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rising. But success comes with its own weight. There were moments I felt disconnected. Like I had built this version of myself so carefully that I didn't know how to stop. Or who I was without the constant need to prove something. Because deep down, even as I succeeded, a quiet voice still asked, "Is this enough now?" And then came the moment that changed everything again. My first real job offer. A prestigious law firm. The kind of opportunity people wait years for. I remember staring at the email, my hands slightly shaking, heart racing, not from fear, but from something else. Something unfamiliar. Validation. I had done it. Completely on my own. No help. No second chances. No one coming back to fix things. Just me. And that's when the realization hit harder than any achievement. I didn't need him to see this. I didn't need him to be proud. Because I already was. That was the shock. Not that I succeeded. But that his absence no longer defined the moment. For so long, everything I did was tied to what he left behind. Every goal, every step forward, connected to a past I couldn't escape. But standing there, reading that offer, I finally understood something I had been building toward all along. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't hoping. I had become someone he would never even recognize. And maybe that was the greatest success of all. And just when I believed my past no longer had the power to reach me, it did. Not as a memory, not as a thought, but as something real, immediate, impossible to ignore. It started with something simple. My phone ringing. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Because I had built a life where I didn't need unexpected interruptions. Where everything was controlled. Predictable. Safe. But something made me pause. Just for a second. And that second changed everything. I picked up. Hello. Silence at first. A breath. Then Emma. My body froze before my mind could react. That voice. Older. Weaker. But unmistakable. It was him. After 15 years of nothing, he was suddenly there. On the other end of a call I never expected to receive. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Because in that moment, everything came rushing back. The door. The silence. The years of being forgotten. All of it compressed into a single second that felt too heavy to hold. Emma, it's Dad. Dad. The word hit differently now. Foreign. Distant. Like something that didn't belong to me anymore. I felt my grip tighten around the phone, my breath shallow, my thoughts colliding. Why now? Why after all this time? And then, he spoke again. I know I don't deserve this, but I need to see you. Need. Not want. Not miss. Need. That was the first crack in everything I thought I understood. I expected anger. Regret. Maybe even an apology. But what I heard instead was desperation. Real. Raw. Unfiltered. And that was the shock. Not that he called, but how broken he sounded. The man who once walked away without hesitation now sounded like he had nowhere left to go. I should have hung up. I should have ended it right there. But I didn't. Because something inside me, something I thought I had buried, shifted. Curiosity. Closure. Or maybe something unresolved. I'll listen, I said finally, my voice steady in a way I didn't feel. But this doesn't change anything. A pause. Then a quiet, almost relieved breath. Thank you, and just like that, the past I had spent years escaping had found its way back into my present. Not as something I needed, but as something that needed me. And even after I ended the call, the silence didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't peaceful. It was loud, filled with questions I thought I had buried. I told myself I didn't owe him anything, that I had already moved on, that meeting him would only reopen wounds I fought so hard to close. And yet, I couldn't ignore the pull. Hours passed, then days. And still, his voice stayed with me. Not the words, but the weakness behind them. That wasn't the man I remembered. That wasn't the man who left without looking back. Something had changed. Something had broken. I tried to convince myself to walk away. I almost did. But then one thought hit me sharp, undeniable. What if this was my only chance for closure? Not for him. For me. That was the shift. Not curiosity. Not sympathy. Control. If I met him, it would be on my terms. No expectations. No forgiveness. Just answers. Just truth. So I called him back. My hand didn't shake this time. My voice didn't break. Tomorrow, I said. One meeting. That's all. There was a pause. Then a quiet, almost disbelieving response. Okay, thank you. And just like that, it was set. But the shock wasn't that I agreed. It was how calm I felt after. No fear. No anger. Just something colder. Final. Because deep down, I already knew. This meeting wouldn't bring him back into my life. It would close the door for good. And when the moment finally came, it didn't feel real. Not at first. The cafe was quiet, almost too quiet, like the world was holding its breath with me. I arrived early. Of course I did. Control, that's what I told myself. But really, I just needed time. Time to prepare. Time to not feel anything. Then the door opened. And there he was. For a second, my mind refused to connect the man in front of me with the father I once knew. He looked smaller, older, like life had taken something from him and never gave it back. His shoulders were slouched, his eyes tired. And when he saw me, he hesitated. That hesitation? I felt it. Because he never hesitated before. He walked toward me slowly, like every step carried weight. And when he finally stood across from me, there was a silence that said more than any words could. Emma. My name sounded unfamiliar coming from him. I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I just looked at him. And waited. He sat down carefully, almost nervously. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the glass of water. That detail hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't the man who walked away without looking back. This was someone else. And that realization, it shifted something. I didn't know if you'd come, he said. I almost didn't, I replied. A pause. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Necessary. He nodded, like he expected that. Like he deserved that. And for a moment, it almost felt like I was the one in control. Like the balance had changed. But then, he looked up. And that's when I saw it. Regret. Real. Undeniable. Too late. I'm sorry, he said. Simple words. But they landed too late to matter the way he probably hoped they would. Because I had waited years to hear that. And now? They felt empty. I know I don't deserve anything from you, he continued, his voice breaking slightly. But I lost everything, Emma. Everything. That was the twist. Not the apology. The confession. He wasn't here to fix the past. He was here because he had nothing left. I leaned back slightly, studying him. Taking it all in. The exhaustion. The desperation. The way his eyes searched mine like I still had something to give. And that's when it hit me. This meeting wasn't about closure for him. It was survival. He needed something. From me. And for the first time in my life, the man who once left me behind was sitting in front of me with nothing. Waiting. Hoping. Begging without saying the words. And that was the moment everything truly changed. And once he said that, the truth didn't come all at once. It unfolded slowly, piece by piece, like something he had been holding in for too long, finally breaking through. At first, his voice was steady, controlled, like he was trying to maintain some sense of dignity. But that didn't last. She left, he said. Just 2 words. But they carried everything. I didn't react. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. Because for the first time, he wasn't the one in control of the story anymore. She took the kids, he continued, his voice lower now. They don't talk to me. They don't even answer my calls. There was a pause. And in that silence, I felt it. The shift. The life he chose was gone. Just like that. I expected anger, blame, excuses. But instead, there was nothing. No defense. No justification. Just loss. I lost my job not long after, he added, almost as an afterthought. Everything just fell apart. That was the tension. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was empty. Stripped of everything he once believed was worth leaving us for. I leaned forward slightly, studying him again. This wasn't a man telling a story. This was a man unraveling. And then came the moment that hit harder than anything else. I thought I made the right choice, he said quietly. I really did. That sentence lingered. Heavy, honest, painfully real. Because it meant he didn't leave by mistake. He didn't leave in confusion. He chose it. Fully. Knowingly. That was the truth. And somehow, that hurt more than everything else. Because it confirmed what I had always feared. We weren't something he lost. We were something he gave up. Intentionally. I didn't think it would end like this, he whispered. And there it was. Regret. Not for leaving. But for how it turned out. That was the twist. Not that he was sorry. But that he was only sorry now. When there was nothing left to hold on to. I felt something inside me tighten. Not anger. Not sadness. Something colder. Clearer. Understanding. Because for the first time, I wasn't hearing his version of events as a daughter. I was hearing it as someone who had already survived the consequences. And then, he looked at me. Really looked at me. I have nowhere to go, Emma. There it was. The real reason. Not closure. Not reconciliation. Survival. He wasn't here to fix what he broke. He was here because he had nothing left. And in that moment, the entire story came into focus. The man who once walked away from everything had finally reached the end of what he chose. And now, he was standing at the only place he had left. Me. But this time, I was the one who got to decide what happened next. And after hearing all of that, the silence between us changed again. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was sharp. Clear. Final. I sat there, looking at him, not as the father I once loved, but as the man who had to live with his choices. And for the first time, I felt the weight shift completely. You chose them, I said quietly. No anger. No raised voice. Just truth. He flinched. That reaction said everything. I know, he whispered. But that wasn't enough. Because knowing didn't change what he did. Knowing didn't give me back those years. Knowing didn't fix anything. I waited for you, I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. For a call. For a message. For anything. He couldn't look at me anymore. And that was the release. Because I didn't need him to respond. I just needed him to hear it. And now you're here, I added. Not because you missed me, but because you have nowhere else to go. That was the twist. Not accusation. Clarity. Raw. Unfiltered. He finally looked up, eyes filled with something I didn't recognize before. Shame. Real shame. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. Good. Because he wasn't going to get it. The air between us tightened again, but this time, I wasn't the one breaking under it. He was. And that was the shock. Not that I was angry, but that I wasn't. No tears. No shaking. No hesitation. Just control. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one losing him. He was losing me. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. And after that moment, there was nothing left to figure out. No confusion. No hesitation. Just a quiet certainty settling in my chest. I looked at him one more time, not searching for answers anymore, but confirming what I already knew. This wasn't about healing. It wasn't about rebuilding. Some things don't come back. I'm glad you said it, I finally spoke, my voice calm, steady, almost detached. Because now I know exactly where we stand. He didn't respond. He couldn't. And for the first time, that silence didn't hurt me. It freed me. I reached into my bag, pulled out some cash, and placed it on the table. Not out of kindness. Not out of obligation. But closure. A final line drawn between who we were and who we would never be again. You'll be okay, I said. Not a promise. Not comfort. Just distance. He stared at the money, then back at me, confusion flickering across his face. Maybe he expected more. Maybe he thought this meeting would change something. That I would soften. That I would remember the version of him that no longer existed. But I didn't. Because that version left 15 years ago. And I survived without him. I don't hate you, I added, standing up slowly. But I don't need you either. That was the truth. The final truth. And it landed harder than anything else I had said. His eyes widened slightly, like he had just realized something too late. Not regret. Not guilt. Something deeper. Irrelevance. That was the shock. Not that I walked away, but that I could. Without looking back. Without breaking. Without needing anything from him. I turned, took a step, then another. Each movement lighter than the last. Not because the past disappeared, but because it no longer controlled me. And behind me? Silence. No voice calling my name. No footsteps following. Just the sound of a chapter ending exactly the way it needed to. Because this time, I was the one who chose to leave. And I didn't hesitate. And as I walked away, something unexpected happened. The weight I had carried for years didn't follow me. It didn't chase me. It didn't pull me back. For the first time in my life, it stayed behind. With him. With the past. With everything I had finally chosen to let go. I thought I would feel something bigger. Relief. Maybe even sadness. But what I felt instead was quiet. A calm I didn't recognize at first. Not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer controlled me. That was the difference. That was the change. Because for years, I believed closure came from answers. From apologies. From someone finally admitting they were wrong. But standing there, walking away from the man who once defined my entire world, I realized something else. Closure doesn't come from them. It comes from you. That was the truth I spent 15 years trying to understand. And the shock? It wasn't that he came back. It was that I no longer needed him to. I used to think being chosen meant everything. That love meant staying. That family meant forever. But life doesn't work like that. People leave. People change. And sometimes, they choose a life that doesn't include you. But that doesn't define your worth. That doesn't erase who you are. And it definitely doesn't decide how your story ends. Because in the end, I wasn't the girl who got abandoned. I was the woman who rebuilt herself. Stronger. Smarter. Untouchable in ways I never thought possible. And maybe that's the real message. Not about revenge. Not about making someone regret what they did. But about becoming someone who no longer needs validation from the people who once hurt you. That's the real power. That's the real freedom. And that's something no one can take away from you. So if you've ever been left behind, forgotten, replaced, this isn't your ending. It's your turning point. Because one day, you'll look back not with pain, but with clarity. And you'll realize something that changes everything. They didn't break you. They revealed you. And once you see that, you stop chasing what left and start building what stays. And that's where your real story begins. And if this story stayed with you, then maybe it was meant to. Because stories like this aren't just about Emma. They're about all of us, the moments we were hurt, the times we felt replaced, the silent battles no one else could see. Maybe you saw yourself in her. Maybe you felt that same pain. That same question, why wasn't I enough? But here's the truth. You are. You always were. And sometimes, the people who walk away don't realize what they lost until it's too late. So if this story made you feel something, anything, don't just scroll away. Pause. Think. Because your story matters too. And maybe it deserves to be heard. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Emma's place? Would you forgive? Or would you walk away? There's no right answer. Only your answer. And that's what makes it powerful. If you want more stories like this, raw, emotional, unforgettable, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and stay with Family Secrets' best revenge stories. Because sometimes, the strongest revenge is becoming someone they can never reach again.